What's going on, wrestling fans? You are now dialed in to the PA Power Hour, and we've got some really big news here tonight. The PIAA had their vote a little bit earlier, a couple hours ago, and they voted to push forward with fall sports. So this is a big deal for not only the state of wrestling, but also the state overall. So we are going to do a special broadcast tonight just to talk a little bit about the implications that this may have for the potential of a wrestling season this year. We're going to be joined by a special guest, Mitch Rupert from the Williamsport Sun-Gazette. So we're happy to have him on. He sat through hours and hours of testimony on the PIAA for the last couple weeks. So I know he's ready to tell us a little bit about what's going on. So, but first, Eric, what's been going on with you? I see you're wearing a blue shirt tonight, so that's definitely not West Virginia colors.
I didn't need any more of your West Virginia stick, so yeah, we're going teal today.
You're going teal. The ACC's playing, right? You guys are playing. ACC, Pitt's going to be playing.
So far, yeah.
Okay. Well, West Virginia
is Big 12. Did they?
No, I think they're playing.
Still on the fence.
I think they're still on the fence, but
are they definitely playing now?
I think they're definitely playing. Come on, it's West Virginia. They'll start their own. They'll select their own division if they have to play. That state of West Virginia needs Mountaineer football. Do you know what I'm saying? Like they ain't got nothing else.
That's true.
They need Mountaineer football.
That's true.
Eric, let's go to Mitch Rupert and introduce him. I really want to hear what he has to say about the PIAA's really. I mean, we didn't really get to hear a whole lot of the discussion. It was more of the vote, but I know they got to do a little question and answer with Dr. Lombardi about what to expect here now that they pushed forward. But first of all, Mitch, thanks for joining us here tonight.
My pleasure, man. I'm glad to be here because I got a question for you, Jeff. I'm not convinced by your argument that you're not hiding a ponytail in the back. So
are you?
I'm glad to be here.
Do you want me to prove to you? Got no ponytail? There's nothing in the back, Mitch. There's nothing. I'm not.
Just let the legend grow.
I'm just saying, you're always front facing. We don't know. I'm just curious.
Oh my gosh. Mitch, I expect that from Eric. But I thought we were closer than that. You and I have had many long evenings inside the Giants Center, where no one else is there. The security's like, come on, guys, you guys got to go. But then you come in here and you rip on the hair. I don't know. Well, you know what, Mitch? We're still happy to have you here.
The hair looks good, man. Hey, the hair looks good. I'm just not. I wasn't convinced. I'm just saying.
I feel you. Mitch, tell us a little bit about. You said it was anticlimactic and there really wasn't a whole lot there. But tell us a little bit about the vote, how it happened. Was there any discussion involved with it?
There was zero discussion, which is maybe the most surprising aspect of this whole thing to me. President Frank Panjikis, he opened up the floor for any discussion, any questions that anybody had, and nobody said a word. Like the only thing that was said was Doug Bohannon from District 3 made the proposal to move forward with sports. Somebody got a second, and then they voted, and that was it. I mean, you talk about anticlimactic. As soon as it was done, they're like, okay, what's the next thing we move on to? And it's like, I've been sitting here for 45 minutes for that. Like that's what I waited for, So that was really surprising to me. But I think the PIAA's done their legwork. I think they've already done the hardest part of this. They've done their work to believe everything can be done safely, first and foremost. So I don't think there was a lot that needed to be said today.
Yeah, and I would agree with you, Mitch, we had 2 weeks, right? There was 2 weeks of kind of deliberation, if you will. And I think a lot of people had the feeling, just based on comments that were being made throughout the week. I know Melissa Mertz was on a call and kind of said, yeah, we're feeling pretty confident. I know Dr. Lombardi had made some comments. So you kind of felt like the feeling was that this was going to pass. But like you said, you didn't really get to hear a lot of discussion. What about the question and answer with Dr. Lombardi? Because I know a lot of people were asking questions specifically about this.
So first and foremost, I think the concern is whether or not there's going to be fans in the stands. And as of right now, there are going to be no spectators in the stands. Everybody is still, and that's the governor's, the state's guidelines, that you can only have 250 outside, 25 for indoor events, and with the way football teams are constructed, that doesn't leave a whole lot of room for fans. Now, Dr. Lombardi said they're open to discussions with the administration about hopefully moving away from a hard number cap and going to a percentage capacity of the facility. They're looking for a 25% capacity, which would at least get the parents of all the players in. And I think you have to have the parents in there, at least one parent for each kid, just in case somebody gets hurt. You got to have them there. Right. So that was kind of the big discussion around that. They did pass a second thing right afterwards that opened the door for schools who are not playing this fall, who've decided they're not going to play this fall, to have alternative opportunities to play. So maybe that means they can go play in the spring, or maybe later down the road, if things improve and they want to go play, they can do that. They opened up the door to make it possible to play as much as you possibly can when you possibly can. So I think the PIAA has everybody's interests in mind of what everyone wants, which is to compete and to have people there to watch it. So those were kind of the two big things we took away today.
Mitch, this has obviously been an issue that has really kind of galvanized sports parents across the state pushing for this. Do you think that had an impact on the PIAA's decision? I know they were kind of blindsided by the Wolf administration announcement a couple of weeks ago saying that they weren't in favor of it. But do you think that push from the parents and really the grassroots support behind it had an impact on the PIAA?
Absolutely, it did. And Dr. Lombardi said as much too. He said, we heard all your calls, we read all your emails, we understood how much it meant to you to have the kids play, and it means something to us too. They understand athletics are part of the educational process, and they want the kids to play just as much as the parents do. He even turned to the parents and said, maybe you want to contact your local legislator when it comes to having spectators and the fans. Put a little pressure on them to make a decision and try and make something happen for us. So they listened to their constituents, and then they made the decision that it was clear their constituents wanted.
Yeah, imagine that, government listening to constituents and moving forward.
Who'd have thunk it, man? Who'd have thunk it?
Now, Mitch, I know you had contacted a lawyer about some of the liability, right? Because that's one of the biggest things that I know a lot of people, and probably a lot of school districts and administrations are mulling right now, is whether or not there's going to be some specific, I wouldn't say immunity, but something that's in place where if a kid were to contract COVID-19 while playing, that the school is not liable. And was there any discussion on that, or where do you think that stands with the PIAA and having fall sports?
Sure, and it stood out to me as soon as Dr. Lombardi said in his testimony before the Athletic Oversight Committee Tuesday. He said, I'm asking the state legislature for help on getting us immunity, on getting the schools immunity. That said to me that it was really important to them. He also said today that nothing has changed since his statement then. They have talked about it with insurance providers for coverage for both themselves and the individual schools, but they said it's probably going to be cost prohibitive to do. I still think, that story I did talking to a lawyer about whose whole thing is liability. That's what he does. I still think you're open the doors to things happening, but you still have a semblance of negligence for something like that to go forward, for something like that to even see a courtroom. But we have to understand that negligence involves not following the parameters, the protocols that have been set forth. And if you skip even one of those, or you let a kid that has a fever that's 0.2 of a degree over what they say you can't play with, if they let that kid play, there's negligence involved in that. So I don't want to see it. I think everybody or people thought that I was trying to stir up something or create a fear in people or create a fear in schools, but we need to be realistic about what we're opening the door to here.
Mitch, is that something that have you heard either on or off the record from school administrators, coaches, that types of things, that's one of their big concerns is the liability issues going forward?
I haven't heard that from anybody. I haven't asked anybody about that per se. But But if you tell me that a school hasn't consulted a lawyer about all of this, I'd say you're nuts. You know, they have to have looked at this and seen just what their liability is, how much trouble they could get in if things aren't followed to the T, you know. And I would think that maybe some of those concerns are why individual schools are deciding not to play this fall, and who can fault them? I mean, the same people that are saying, you know, everybody's sue happy are the same people who are going to complain when your property taxes go through the roof because you're dealing with 4 lawsuits.
Yeah, and you kind of raise a good point there with the, you know, with the constituents and what do they actually want, and I think, like you said, it's negligence is negligence, so we should make sure we're aware of that. One thing that obviously, Mitch, we cover wrestling. This is the fall sports, but what are your feelings on wrestling? I know you are very heavily involved in wrestling. What do you think? What are the ramifications? What's the implications for us in wrestling, and what do you see coming of this?
There's 13 weight classes. That means 26 kids got to wrestle. How do you fit 26 kids inside a gym when you're only allowed 25? I don't know. You know, I've told people that, listen, I'm not afraid of the coronavirus or things like that. I live my life. I go to the stores and I need to go to the store. I don't want to sit in the gym with 500 other people right now either, because I don't know that everybody is being as cautious as everybody else. You know, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do it because that's what my job says I have to do, you know, but what it's going to mean for wrestling, I don't know, man. I think that's 4 months, 5 months down the road, 3 months. What month are we in? 4 months down the road.
It's still 2020.
And we know, yeah, it's clearly still 2020. That's 4 months down the road, and so many things can change with this stuff between now and next week, let alone now in December. So my guess is the PIAA is going to start working now on a plan for that. They have to. They got to have contingencies and be ready to go.
Well, Mitch, we certainly appreciate your insight. I know you spent a lot of time on the phone today and throughout the couple weeks with the PIAA, and we appreciate you taking some time out to talk to us tonight about this and provide some insight into it. I for your sake, I hope we are being able to cover wrestling soon, so I can prove to you that I do not have a ponytail. Okay. Unbelievable. You know,
I'm looking forward to it, man. I do.
All right, Mitch. Well, again, thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Okay.
My pleasure, guys. Take care. Be well. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mitch.
So, Eric, a couple things that I heard, right? One was about the fans, right? So there were some things being said about whether fans were going to be permitted or not. And then, of course, you had some school districts, or you had some even districts that are, saying, well, maybe we're not going to have fall sports. So regardless of whether the PIAA says this is a go, we know that there's some school districts out there that are opting out of this. So what does this do for those schools? Does that change it?
Well, and I think one key distinction is that the PIAA said that this will be up to the individual districts, the individual school districts. So they're not saying, yeah, you have to have, they're not threatening, oh, we're going to kick you out of the organization if you don't have your PIAA sports this year. But they're saying you have the opportunity to go ahead and hold that. And I think that's a key distinction, and I think that's important because, as you mentioned, I think was it Uniontown was one that said they weren't going to have any fall sports, and so I mean, could that change? Maybe, but I would think that if your school has already come out and said, hey, look, we don't feel like it's safe, it probably would be pretty hard to make that change to convince them that this is going to be okay.
Now, were you surprised by the vote? Heavily. I thought it'd be a little bit closer. 25 to 5, I think, was the final. 25 to 5. So, were you surprised by the more outpouring in support of that?
Everything we've heard from the PIAA leading up to this was that they were pretty confident that they could go ahead and have the fall sports season as we're as with as many precautions as they can and still be safe. So I did feel like that they would definitely go ahead with it. I don't know if 25-5, that is a pretty good majority there, that most of the people recommended going ahead with the fall sports season. So I think that shows the confidence that the PIAA has in their ability to do it safely, and that they, as Mitch said, that they've done their homework. They've pushed ahead with, hey, this is how we can do it. This is why it's safe. And I think that confidence has led to that overwhelming majority vote of 25-5.
And not only that, but the outpouring of support. Like you said, you're at work, and there's just moms and dads watching, trying to get up with the press conference and trying to stay on top of whether there was going to be sports or not in the fall. It seems like even people, because of course you're always going to have those people that are going to be, I call them like fringes, whether they're whole for it or entirely against it. You're always going to have those people on those different ends of the spectrum. But it seemed like a lot of just reasonable, middle of the road people were like, yeah, we got to play sports. So you think that had a lot to do with the fact that the PIAA saw that, heard that, and now they wanted to push forward? Because remember, they're going against what the governor recommended. He's just one person.
Well, I think the key to this is that if you say, let's go ahead and let's have the season, and you run into problems, you can always shut it down. If you go 2 weeks in, if you say, no, we're not going to do it, and you go 2 weeks in, then you can't start it up and say, you know what, we probably could have done this. So I think you go at it cautiously. You take all the precautions that you can. You do everything to protect the student athletes and put their safety first. And if we see issues, I think they will shut it down. But, I think you go into it doing everything you can to make sure that everyone's safe and go about it as you can.
And as Mitch said, because I asked him about wrestling and the implications that this has for wrestling, we are several months away from a wrestling season. Wrestling is competed indoors. It's also competed at the height of cold and flu season. So, we have all these different factors, and I had a lot of people say, like, what does this do for wrestling? And I hate to say it, but I don't know if it does a whole lot for wrestling. I mean, it doesn't hurt wrestling, but
right. There's not a step backward,
right.
But I don't know that it was a giant leap forward either.
So when you look at just the fall sports in general, being competed mainly outside, you look at wrestling, and as Mitch said, indoors, we're talking about how many wrestlers are on a team. At the most you have 14 actually, or 13 wrestling, but you have backups, you have managers, you have multiple coaches, you have referees, you have scorers, you have announcers. Now you're talking about, okay, how are we going to do this, right? And I know in Allegheny County, for example, the Allegheny County high schools were saying, well, we can't even play a game outside because the county restrictions were 50 people in an outdoor setting, so they couldn't have under 50 people at a football game. So I believe today I was reading that the Allegheny County made some type of exemption or some type of stipulation where they could actually have more than 50 people in a setting.
Yeah, I did see something from a tweet from him saying that to that effect, that they could hold the games, but parents and fans wouldn't be able to attend. So, I mean, I think we've got to go in baby steps with this. If, the choice is sporting events with no fans is still better than no sporting events at all, isn't it?
I mean, I would think so. Yeah, I mean, I think this is about, the kids and getting them being able to play the sports. So, yeah, of course, I would say, but I agree with Mitch. Like, you almost have to have, I feel like you'd have to have a parent there, at least one. But I don't know. Does that coach assume liability and?
Well, I mean, ideally everybody's parents go to every sporting event that their kids play in, but we all know that that's not the case. And so, there are times when parents have to work, can't make it to a baseball game, whatever. And yeah, I think the coach in that instance and the trainer, they assume the decision-making process there and say, hey, if Johnny's hurt, we'll decide how bad it is, what needs to be done, and go from there. So yeah, I think that if we can, we'd get at least one parent or guardian to the games, but there's still situations where that doesn't happen, even whenever it's open to everyone.
The one thing I wanted to ask Mitch, and I didn't, because how Governor Wolf had said something along the lines of, if your school is having virtual classes, you certainly shouldn't be having any type of athletic events. I'm assuming this applies across the board, right? This isn't, even if you're doing virtual for 9 weeks or even a hybrid, I'm assuming that you still can have athletics, right? I mean, I guess
that's
that'd be
a good question,
right?
Because I told you how the moms throughout the building here all seemed to find a way to watch the PIAA vote while I couldn't, but I talked to one, and she said that she felt bad for those kids that were virtual learning. She made it sound like they could not participate. I'm not sure of that. I mean, if it's open to the PIAA, then maybe that is the case, that they can go ahead. So I'm not 100% sure on that.
And one thing that I keep on hearing a lot is it's up to that individual district. It's up to those individual schools, right? So, you have the state up here. You have Governor Wolf making suggestions, but it's the PIAA that governs athletic sports in high school. They're going to make a recommendation, which they did. Then you have 12 districts in the state of Pennsylvania. All 12 of those districts can have their own determination of, yes, we're going to continue with fall sports as recommended by the PIAA, or that district's going to opt out, right? They're going to say we're not doing that. But then you have those individual schools that can also determine whether they're going to participate in sports, and maybe to what extent they're going to participate in sports. Maybe it's only this sport. Maybe it's, so I think we're going to see kind of like just a mashup of different scenarios. Like, oh well, this team over here, Franklin Regional is only doing games within a certain region, or maybe this team over here, they're going to be playing only individual instead of team. I don't know. I see it being very convoluted and a little bit confusing. I think football is probably the most straightforward thing, right?
But isn't that a common sense approach, though? I mean, we've talked about it before. There's a big difference between a school district in Philadelphia or Allegheny County, where there are more cases, versus one of the rural counties, like we've used Elk County before as the example, where there might not be nearly as many cases. I think that the safety and the fear factor in the more populated counties and areas with more cases, you're going to be much more hesitant to go ahead and be able to perform in these sports like you might normally do, whereas some of the other places are saying, hey, I don't know anyone who's had COVID. I don't know anyone who knows anyone who's had COVID. So why can't we go ahead and do this?
Yeah, and it's, as Mitch said, wrestling season is so far along. It's so far away. Even though it's really, at this time we would be preparing for the surge, we'd be doing a lot of other things, but the wrestling season really, I mean, in 2020, with the way this year is going, it's a long way away. A whole heck of a lot can change. As you even said, if a football team or somebody gets it and now they're shutting things down. I mean, look at the professional sports leagues, right? The Pirates had which is probably a good thing. The less games the Pirates are playing, the better, because they're absolutely awful. But you look at some of the MLB teams that have contracted it and then they had to cancel series. The other thing I heard Dr. Lombardi said is, if we're fortunate enough to have playoffs, we would like to do a statewide playoff. I think they're just taking it one step at a time, really, at this point. I mean, the playoffs, that's another thing that's a long way away too.
Yeah, and I will admit to being a little I feel like it's certainly in the PIAA's best interest, if they can have playoffs, to have playoffs, because that's where the majority of their funding comes from. So if they're going to continue to be an organization, they, are going to do everything they can to have playoffs. I'm not suggesting that they would put the safety of student athletes at risk for that, but there's a realistic part that says, hey, if we can do this, we need to do it, because we need to figure out a way to have fans there in order to continue to be an ongoing organization.
Right, and I mean, you look at the Big Ten, you look at all these other major conferences, and everyone's talking about the billions of dollars that they're missing in revenue, all the billions of dollars, and the trickle down effect of that. So I see what you're saying with the PIAA. It's like, okay, yeah, they need, in order to have an operating budget, you need to have some income, right? And yeah, I mean, what's a sports season without playoffs? We don't just play to play; we play to win, right, Eric?
Yeah, you're right, but at the same time, again, I think if you talk to kids and parents and say, look, we can have a season and go out there and have fun and play it, or we can say, no, we're definitely not going to have a season. They'll take the season even without playoffs. Would you rather have a season and normal with fans, with playoffs, with all that? Absolutely. But if the choice is no sports or sports, you're going to take it even if you can't play, because the reality is the majority of these, like I look at football, there are maybe 16, 20 teams that realistically have a shot at winning a state title in each division. I mean, that's pretty broad, going that number. In reality, 95% of the teams in the state aren't going to win a state title. They really have no shot at it.
Well, this is the time now when people are like, well, Philly, District 12, they can't compete. Not only do they recruit kids from Jersey and they have, St. Joe's Catholic and all these other, they're like, well, if District 12's out, and we're definitely playing because we actually have a shot to win a state title, because we're homegrown. Everyone's homegrown except for those schools, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to get into a whole debate over.
No, we're not. We've done the recruiting, the private school, public school. We've done a lot on that already.
Eric, and I think we both agree that in terms of wrestling, right? Because we are a wrestling focused organization, and we are anxious to figure out whether we're going to have a season or not. In terms of this wrestling season, how much does this vote have an effect on that today? I just think it shows that the PIAA is willing, ready, and able to try to have sports at any cost. Not any cost, but they're willing to go against the governor. They're willing to take what he would consider a risk to have high school students compete in athletics. So I think if anything, it just affirms the fact that the PIAA is going to at least try to have a wrestling season. And as Mitch said, they're probably working on some type of contingency for those indoor winter sports, such as wrestling, basketball, even swimming and diving. So where do you think we stand in terms of likelihood, or what do you think? What are your thoughts on just today in general, and just the overall vibe of whether we're going to have wrestling or not?
I would say that I'm a little more optimistic than I was a couple weeks ago. Whenever the announcement first came out, whenever the Wolf administration said, no, this is not something that we're pushing for. We don't think that there should be sports at this time. I was really down and really pessimistic about the likelihood of a wrestling season happening in PIAA. And the college football scene was also another reason that I wasn't optimistic, because I've said before, if this, all the money that we talked about, the billions of dollars riding on it, if they can't figure out a way to make it happen, how can the small school district with a tiny operating budget? But after thinking about it and listening to some of the arguments, I realized that, hey, it is a different situation, because like we said, they're not traveling across states like college football conferences are going across 8-9 states, something like that. Here you're looking at a pretty small geographic area where the risk factor isn't nearly as great in that. And so I think that definitely helps. As we said, we're months down the line, so hopefully somehow we get a handle on this and continue to put the brakes on things and slow down the number of cases, the number of deaths, the number of hospitalizations, and we can see a positive trend moving in towards wrestling season. And that makes me a little more optimistic that this decision today, if they said no, that they're that they're
Eric, we lost you there.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine now. Yeah, it looked like we lost you there for a
See
second.
me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you were.
I had a power outage.
Yeah, I saw the lights flicker off.
Yeah, it was really strange. I've never had that happen.
Are you
here
scared,
before.
Eric? Do you need assistance? Do you need medical assistance?
I think I'm all right. I think I'm okay.
So yes, you are a pessimist. You were pessimistic about the fact that
I'm not pessimistic. I'm
you are.
realistic.
Okay. Each his own.
I think that I like to think of myself as slightly optimistic.
I agree with you in the sense that this gives me optimism today in hearing what the PIAA is saying and looking at the votes in terms of them willing and able to push sports forward, especially in the fall. But there's a few things that are going to factor into that. How does this work? If fall sports completely, just fail in that sense, and we have a bunch of outbreaks and we have a bunch of schools that are shutting down because of spread in sports, that's obviously going to take a toll on winter sports. But between now and wrestling season, there's so many variables. Heck, there's an election. There's a presidential election taking place.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if you heard that or not.
No, I hadn't heard
Yeah, it's
that.
crazy.
Maybe see a commercial on TV or something every now and then.
Or just anywhere you go, there's
Yeah.
something you can't get away from it. There's a lot that's going to go into play here, and a lot of the things that Dr. Lombardi was referencing and going back to were the fact that these sports were already being played at a youth recreational level. So I'd be curious to see if there are wrestling tournaments being held specifically in Pennsylvania. What are the numbers like from there? And can we have data that shows, well, this event held in this area, everyone was screened going in, and no one contracted COVID. I don't know if that's even possible, but I'm curious to see if there's anything like that where they can say definitively wrestling can happen, and here's why.
Well, I think that you can't prove a negative, but I think that if there had been a situation where there was a big outbreak stemming from a wrestling tournament or flag football or baseball or whatever from a youth competition, that really would have been news, and that would have gotten out. The fact that we haven't heard about that, I think, is a sign that hasn't happened. You wouldn't be able to hide that if you had a summer wrestling tournament or late summer, I guess now, and there was it was traced back to that 20 cases of COVID came from that one event. You would have heard about that. That wouldn't be under wraps. You couldn't contain that if that happened. So the fact that we haven't heard about it, I think, speaks to the success of these events, that there hasn't been for high school athletic competitions that we've had in the quote-unquote off-season so far.
Yeah, and we have to pay close attention to what goes on with these fall sports, and as kids start getting back into school, because remember, a lot of school districts they're not having in-person classes quite yet. We're seeing that at a college level as well. So if once kids start actually coming back and you have full classrooms and you have full sports, with or without fans, if we don't see a big surge, we don't see that second wave of coronavirus, then that really, I think, sets it up nicely for winter sports such as wrestling, where we may be able to have something, at least somewhat of a season. So, but before we go into what maybe college wrestling is going to look like, we're going to go to a short commercial break here with the Tactical Mind. Be right back.
This is the Tactical Mind, and I work with athletes in the field of sports psychology as a cognitive performance coach. Within 5 minutes of talking to a parent, they make the connection right away that this would be great for my kid to have when they're in college, when they're just going through the ups and downs of high school. Who wouldn't benefit from having more self-awareness? Who wouldn't benefit from having the ability to self-regulate our emotions and our counterproductive thoughts? Who wouldn't benefit from having more optimism, not just on the field, but in life?
The tacticalmindllc.com for more information on getting your brain ready for competition and getting the mental edge and getting the mental advantage on your opponents. Definitely check out the Tactical Mind with my good friend Nick Fuller. Eric, I want to go to some college news because the EIWA, they came out with a release that said that they're going to allow practices in the fall semester, but they're not going to have any competition until no sooner than January 1st of 2021. Were you able to see that, and what were your thoughts on something like that?
I did not see that specific release, but honestly, it doesn't surprise me. And I mean, I'd heard months ago that we were looking at probably a January 1st season as far as wrestling goes for the NCAA. And I know like Willie Saylor has pushed for, a changing of the season and the way it is. I don't know that he was specifically saying make it a one semester season, just after January 1st. But I think he had talked about, either a dual meet season and part of it and then a tournament season. But as far as it goes, I mean, wrestling season is really long. And okay, a lot of the sports seasons are long, but basketball, you're not trying to hold a weight from November to March. That's a long time for guys to try to be down to weight, to cut weight. So I think one semester, I think is fine. I think you can really tweak the season a little bit and have it in the second semester and allow guys to live a little bit, through Thanksgiving and Christmas and not be, trying to hold their weight the whole time throughout all those months of the season.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine that whole season, being in the spring semester, so to speak? That'd be huge for a lot of wrestlers.
Well, and I mean, maybe you back it up a little farther instead of going against the NCAA basketball tournament like we're doing right now most of the time with the NCAA wrestling tournament. Maybe you back it up into April whenever you'll have maybe Major League Baseball going on, but other than that, it'll slow down a little bit as far as not going up against that behemoth that is the March Madness.
And if you look at what the EIWA said, was the conference is planning a EIAA-centric schedule. And what they say, it's designed to maximize the number of bouts for our wrestlers. There are currently 8 weekends between the new year and the final weekend of the regular season. So you look at that, they say dual meets are going to be the priority, but they also say that they're going to have the EIAA championships at Cornell on March 5th and 7th. So they are kind of stepping up and saying, okay, this is because they are a wrestling specific division, right? They're a conference specifically for wrestling. And you look at them already taking steps to say, okay, we're agreeing to not compete during the fall semester, but we can practice in the fall semester, and then our priorities are focused more on dual meets within that conference. So I think, if anything, you're going to see other conferences maybe look at something like what they're doing and say, okay, maybe we should focus on, maybe we're not going to go to the Southern Scuffle, maybe we're not going to go to Midlands, but maybe we are just going to have, Big Ten duels and then a Big Ten championship, something along those lines. I would hope that, but then again, I mean, if the Big Ten was willing to say no to college football,
yeah,
I say that's easier for them to say, well, you know what, we didn't have football, how are we going to have wrestling too? the only benefit I see is the fact that wrestling was cut short last year, so they didn't have an NCAA championship. You're saying that you're going to have kids miss two years of NCAA championship postseason competition. That's pretty harsh, even for the Big Ten.
Yeah, that would really be depressing. I hope that we're able to push it back, get a handle on everything, and as you said last week, the COVID doesn't understand a calendar. It doesn't know that January 1st, okay, we're not going to infect anyone else again. Everybody's going to be healthy now because it's 2021. So I mean that's not a realistic thing to expect, that all of a sudden, just because we've moved it back to January 1st, that everybody's going to be fine. But I do think that, obviously the more time you give yourself, the better opportunity you have of getting a handle on all of this and figuring out that the best ways to do things to move forward as we can. And, hopefully we have something coming soon, a vaccine that we can get a handle on this and have everything under control. And as we said, we do have a few months left that we can still push toward that. And hopefully by the time wrestling season is ready to come around, we can actually be in a position where we can go forward with it and without all the limitations that we're worried about.
And one thing I really like that the EIAA came out with this, because they made some pretty good points. They said the current preliminary schedules for the season are not possible, which, I mean, that's not a shock, right? But they're stating the obvious. Like, clearly the schedules that we had coming into the season, they're just not going to be possible. What they also said is non-conference matches are permitted, but they may necessarily be done to minimize the regional opponents. So they may actually do things like, within that certain geographic area. You may still have Drexel and Penn wrestle, but that may be it. You may have Brown or Princeton or Harvard wrestle, but that may be it. So with the Big Ten, like you said, you're talking about crossing some a significant number of state lines. Look at the travel restrictions that are placed on individuals traveling from hotspot states to others. Iowa just got off the list for quarantining if you come to Pennsylvania from Iowa. So, you got to look at some of those types of decisions as well, whether you're actually going to be traveling or not.
Do you think we'll see more tri-meets and quad meets and things like that, where we say, okay, we may not be able to have a Southern Scuffle or a Midlands or, Rena or Vegas, Cliff Keen, but maybe we can get 4 Big Ten teams together? I mean, how much fun would it be to see Iowa, Penn State, Ohio State, have all them in one location? Of course, if you can't have the fans in there, it would really suck. But, you could do that where you're limiting the travel, where you're saying, okay, we're not going to make Penn State travel 5 times to the Midwest during the season, but let's send them there and have 3 or 4 teams that they can match up against and compete in one setting. To me, that makes sense if what you're fearful of is the travel and how that can really increase the danger and the spread of COVID. So I think if you go that route, that gives you an opportunity to still get those competitions in, like you're saying with the EIWA, where they're really prioritizing those conference matches and at the same time limiting the amount of travel that these teams are doing.
Yeah, and I think that's dependent upon, where we're at in terms of the state of, the COVID rates in that particular state. So, for example, if you had it in Iowa, where the numbers are lower, and I think it's going to come down to those individual schools. If say they have winter sports that are allowed, those individual schools may say we're only going to compete against people within 600 miles of our campus, which, I mean, it all is kind of goofy. I don't know, like to compete in Pennsylvania as opposed to Virginia or Maryland. I mean, I don't know. It just seems a little bit silly to me.
Well, yeah, the state lines again are arbitrary. I mean, it doesn't matter so much the state lines as the hot spots. But we've talked before about all the challenges that wrestling faces with it being such a contact sport, and bodily fluids, and just the ease with which you could potentially transfer and pass along the virus. I do think this is the one positive that we have is you can't get 4 football teams together and say, okay, yeah, we're going to play everybody in one day. You can't do it with basketball. I mean, they don't play double headers in these sports. They don't, things like that. But I think with wrestling, that is the one opportunity that we have to say, hey, let's limit the travel, but let's still try to get as much competition in there as we can if we're allowed to go forward with this.
And I would hope that a quad meet or a tri meet, something like that would make more sense to universities, because you're saying, okay, we're going to do it in one fell swoop. We're doing it in one setting. So you're limiting the travel. So instead of, how many times did Penn State have to fly or take a bus last year to get to where they needed to go to compete? That's a lot of traveling. So if you're saying, okay, we're only going to have like 3 weekends of competition, right? 3 weekends of quad meets, tri meets, whatever you want, and then the rest are is geared towards the postseason. Because let's be honest, if we are going to have a season, it probably is not going to start until into January. So you're already looking at cutting down on some of those early season tournaments like the Cliff Keen, Southern Scuffle. So now you're saying, okay, well, if we're only competing from January to February between the conference tournaments, then you're only going to have a limited number of weekends to actually have competition. So why not limit it to say, hey, these are the 3 competition weekends, even if you want to stagger them. Just get some matches under your belt and then say, okay, now we're going to go into conference tournaments and slowly, make that transition into opening it up a little bit. I still don't see fans ever being a part of this, but maybe that's just me being pessimistic. Maybe you rubbed off on me a little bit.
So it's my fault now that no, I agree. I mean, that would be a really quick turnaround, it feels like, to go from where we are right now to saying, yeah, we can put 15,000 people in Carver Hawkeye for a dual meet. I mean, I don't think that's really realistic, but if we can watch these guys wrestle, even if we can't all be there, I'd take that over where we are right now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's more that's better than not having wrestling. The other question I have is, so if there is not a wrestling season per se, an official wrestling season, a lot of people say in high school we're going to see a lot more wrestlers just doing the travel wrestling, and they're going to do more of the recreational wrestling where you have these non-sanctioned events taking place. What can those college wrestlers do? Because how does that hurt them and eligibility? What if there is no season?
The first thing you're going to say is this is going to be the biggest season ever for red shirts. Yeah. Everybody who has a red shirt available is probably going to take it this year. I don't know. You know Spencer really well. I don't know if you've talked to his family at all, but I mean, this would make perfect sense to take the red shirt this year. Why risk going out there and, getting a couple matches in and them saying, nope, sorry, we can't do it. Can't have an NCAA championships this season. Take the red shirt. Hopefully by 2021 everything is good and we can go back to normal and get the season in. And I think you're also going to see that in high school. You're going to see more kids than ever that are going to be held back in junior high and those levels, and saying, you know what, let's let Johnny just take the year and go back to 8th grade. I know of one really high profile kid, that's already been decided that's going to happen, and I know that a lot more are pushing for that it's going to be a situation where if you can do it, a lot of people are going to opt for that because of just the risk factors of going to school, of the uncertainty of how it's all going to work, and never mind the fact that you can give your kid a little bit of an advantage if you can hold him back a year and have him going into varsity a year later than he might otherwise be.
Yeah, I mean, so it's hard enough when I do the top incoming freshman report. It's super hard to do even without COVID, because you're trying to figure out if there's a lot of kids that get held back. It's like you go through and you see their grade and you're like, okay, well, they were in 7th grade last year. They're going to be in 8th grade this year. All right, they were in 8th grade last year. They're going to be in 9th grade this year. Nope, not really. I can't tell you how many wrestlers I've put on the top incoming freshman report that actually repeated 8th grade, or they were held back. So this year, I mean, I don't even know if I should be doing a top incoming freshman report, because I know there's a lot of kids that just, like you said, if they have the ability to, which I would assume with COVID, there's going to be a lot of restrictions lifted, and there's going to be more flexibility for kids to be held back. It's going to be hard to make sense, heads or tails, of whether this kid is actually going to be in 9th grade or not. Do you lose that year of, quote, eligibility in high school to have 4 years, where you may actually have 4 seasons? I don't know. So that's another thing, as you're looking at the freshmen coming in. I think you're right. You're going to see a lot of college wrestlers take red shirts. You're going to see a lot of what should be freshman age wrestlers being held back into 8th grade. But you never really answered the question, Eric. College wrestlers, if they don't have a season, can they? What if there's an open tournament? What's a non-NCAA tournament, like you wouldn't have eligibility issues with? You compete unattached. Say Wyoming, right? You're in the middle of Wyoming and you have a wrestling tournament. Can they compete in that?
They should be able to. I mean, I don't see why they. If you're saying, hey, the only thing the NCAA could say is, look, we don't feel that it's safe, and if you're going outside of this to get competition and doing something that we feel is unsafe, we're not going to reward you for that behavior and say, yeah, you get an extra year and you're able to do that. We're going to consider that being a year for you. But
it's easier for.
I guess. Go ahead.
It's easier for high school students and athletes to do something like that, because there's just less restrictions on them, as opposed to a college athlete. If they're not enrolled in the school, right? They're taking a gray shirt. They're doing, whatever it is, where they're not actually enrolled in an academic institution. Can they compete in? I guess as long as they're not getting paid, right? They should be able to compete in some type of. I guess the question I'm getting at is, will there still be some form of tournaments? Like, can Flow put on a college age tournament if there's no season?
It would seem to me like, they can go and wrestle in university nationals, whether they're or whatever it's called now. They can go and do that, and it doesn't affect their. I know that's freestyle, but it's. I think you should still be able to go and wrestle if it's not an NCAA sanctioned tournament. How can the NCAA say this is not right? I mean, it's not your call if it's, just an open tournament.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess it would come down to if you are enrolled in a school, if you are a part of a team, because there's a lot of kids out there that are just itching to get back on the mat, and they have to be wanting to have some type of competition. So if there is no season, if the NCAA comes in or whatever conference they're a part of says there's no winter sports and there's no wrestling, they should have the ability to go compete in some type of event without losing any eligibility requirements or any losing something like that. I don't know though. I would like to see it happen, but if there are no winter sports and there is no wrestling, I'd at least like to see some of our top guys compete in something, right?
I would think that if the NCAA says no, we're not giving you another year of eligibility, but we're also not having a season, I think you're going to see a lot of wrestlers and programs go rogue and be like, well, wait a minute, what are you actually doing for us? We're going to lose the year anyway. Why not go and put on our own events and hold our own things and let our guys compete? I mean, what if I'm a senior and I'm not going to get the year back? What can you do to me?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. If you're
especially to say that you're going to lose your scholarship, which that would be a big one, obviously.
But if you're a senior,
other than that, I mean, yeah, if I'm not getting another year of eligibility, what can you do to me?
Yeah, you bring up a good point there, and maybe they can pull a Nebraska and be like, you know what, we're going to explore our options. Maybe we're going to go to another conference or something. If the
exactly,
NCAA, if they
we'll
say
start our own wrestling league. It's not like they.
maybe we'll have the SEC finally come back to wrestling, and we'll have a bunch of SEC programs that are not actually SEC programs join, Big Ten schools that are.
All right, now you're getting really optimistic that not only is wrestling not going to be hurt by this, but it's going to grow and expand into the SEC.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's like you said, like it's human nature to be resilient and to figure out ways. And you said go rogue. It's human nature that if people want something, they're going to do it. You can.
Well, and I think especially the wrestling community, if you tell them, hey, you're not allowed to wrestle this year, they're going to be like, screw you, I'm finding a way.
Or we can just have the virtual NCAAs again. I mean, those
that was awesome last year for, the situation, but don't want it again. Real NCAA tournament.
And we would have been in a football stadium.
We've got hotel rooms in St. Louis, Jeff. We're ready.
Yeah, I don't know why you booked those rooms already, because I hope you got insurance on that, because there's a good chance we may not. I still have flights. I still have credits and flights for NCAAs.
I don't even know. I've got like 4 different airlines that I've got credits on that, so many flights have been canceled, and just disastrous. Yeah,
it is disastrous. So recapping, PIAA says today, after 2 weeks of deliberation, after Governor Wolf says, I'm not quite sure having sports is a good thing, that they're going to have fall sports. They're going to push ahead, leaving it up to the individual schools or conferences or not conferences, districts, which is good for potential for wrestling, but it doesn't really mean a whole lot for wrestling, because we just really don't know. There's so many variables and factors between now and December. But let's not forget, open rooms and having practices. Can you even? And I was talking to some other coaches about this. Is can you even have a wrestling practice in your school? Because where do most open gyms and most club practices occur? Unless you have your own facility, can you have the school actually open up the doors and let you use the wrestling room? I think the answer for a lot of times it's no, you can't. So that's going to be something I'm very curious to see what happens is if you're not going to be able to wrestle and practice in the school, where are you going to go?
I say you start renting out your basement, Jeff.
My
Put
basement.
a mat down there, yeah.
Yeah, I have a Cape Cod. You can't see it because this is all disguised. I make it look like, a high-profile studio. We don't have flow money, and there's actually like a pantry behind me right now. So no, I have a washer and dryer. I have a dog that barks. I don't think we're going to be able to do practices down here. The PA Power. What do you call your studio? The PA Power pad.
Mine's going to be the PA Power pit.
Oh God,
because it's like a little. No, not PITT, just PIT.
Oh, okay, pit. Well,
it's like it's going to be 7 by 12 feet.
Yeah.
It's not big. It's a little pit in the basement, but hopefully it's going to have good sound and internet at some point, and
basically a jail cell.
Cool stuff on the walls, and
basically a jail cell. You said
it's my jail cell.
You said pit because at WVU there was a place called the Pit at one time where people would go to tailgate during the games. It was kind of obviously in a pit. Joe Youngblood can tell you all about this, and a lot of not so socially distanced thing going on there. I don't. We're gonna have to keep a close eye on things. I would like to get a coach on next week to talk about those types of things, such as having open gyms, having practice, and if so, where are you going to do it? Because you're probably not going to be able to have it in a school. So I'd be curious to hear what wrestling does moving forward. But Eric, anything else? Any closing thoughts for you?
Well, it wasn't a great day. It wasn't great news, but it wasn't bad news. So at this point, we'll take that and move forward and try to be optimistic and find a way to get wrestling going.
Okay. All right, Eric. I like it. You're coming over to the side of light. Your glass. Do you have a glass there? Because it must have water in it. Is it full?
It does.
Is it half? Is it half
empty?
Oh
no.
Jeez, Eric, you're doing so well. Hey, we appreciate it. Special PA Power Friday night edition. Don't get too crazy out there. stay tuned for some big news coming from PA Power Wrestling, Eric. I know we've been teasing it for a little bit, but we got some really big news coming next week. Dyson Gold will be with me to give some, to spill the beans, if you will, of what we have to offer. I'm pretty excited. I know you're pretty excited. So I can't wait to share the news with everybody. But in the meantime, stay dialed into PA Power Wrestling on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. By the way, we had a bunch of kids commit. I didn't want to, I know we're over our hour, but Caden Berger from Reynolds is going to Clarion. Gage Musser from Commodore Perry is going to Air Force. And Tate Nichter from Chambersburg is going to Drexel to join his older brother. So a couple big name commits coming in. So keep an eye out. We'll be putting that stuff out on social media as they come in. All right.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Not too many guys from PA that I remember going to Air Force, so that's kind of neat to have one going out there.
Yeah, I think I can remember a couple, the Giorgios from Schuylkill Valley, maybe. But yeah, there's not a whole lot. It's like kind of like going to Wyoming. So stay tuned for some more, and hopefully we have some more good news to bring you next week. Thanks for listening. Have a good night.